Welcome to World Mycotoxin Report Impact 2021, a webinar brought to you by Biomin and Romer Labs. My name is Joshua Davis and I am Communications Manager at Romer Labs. In addition to hosting this wonderful webinar year after year, I also have the privilege of producing the Romer Labs Mycotoxin Minute, our weekly look at interesting stats and facts about mycotoxins. It's good to be with you. I'd like to welcome today's three panelists to the webinar. First up on our panel is Alexandro Marchioro, Senior Mycotoxin Expert at Biomin. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm fine. It's a pleasure to be here today.
It's good to have you. Alex, at this point, I'd probably ask you about all the wonderful places you traveled over the last year, but with all the coronavirus restrictions, of course, you've probably been doing a lot of sitting at home like the rest of us. That said, what are some of the main mycotoxin concerns that you've been hearing about?
Yeah, it's true. We work a lot from home, and the corona crisis brought us alternatives, ways to keep in touch with the market, like this one, web. And however, problems related to mycotoxin contamination continue to appear during the past year. And today we are going to present a lot of data on contamination profiles that we found.
All right, great. Well, welcome back. It's good to see you. I'd also like to welcome back Anneliese Müller, Product Manager for Mycotoxins at Biomin.
Hi, Josh. My pleasure to be here. How's it going?
I'm doing great, thanks. And I'm also glad to be here. Is there anything in particular that stands out about this year's survey results?
I have to admit, most of the surveys really interesting, but as last year, I'm a big fan of the emerging mycotoxins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the emerging mycotoxins, those ones that you may not always test for, that still could cause problems, right?
Yes, exactly. I think it's a topic we should pay attention to.
Well, good. And if I understand correctly, you'll be saying a little bit more about that later, right?
Exactly.
We're looking forward to that. Good to have you here.
Thanks.
And I'd also like to welcome my colleague Nora Kogelnik, Product Manager for Mycotoxin Rapid Solutions and ELISA at Romer Labs, who is also joining us here for the first time.
Hi, Josh. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here, Nora. And if I'm not mistaken, you've been more than a little busy lately, haven't you?
That's right. We've rolled out a new product, AgroStrip Pro Vortex test kits for the rapid detection of mycotoxin. I will be talking about it a bit later in the webinar.
Well, that's great. I'm sure that we're all looking forward to hearing more about it. And we'll certainly talk about it a bit later. But before we jump into the webinar, I just want to make a few announcements to our audience. I want to remind you that this is an interactive webinar. When you open the toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll find a menu for audio, visual, and other technical settings within the webinar platform. You can ask a question at any time throughout the session, so please feel free to enter questions for our speakers and for the Q&A session later on. If we can't get to your question over the course of the webinar, we may contact you by email afterwards with an answer. We want to hear from you, so please don't be shy. So without further ado, let's get into the survey. Alex, tell us, what can you say about the survey this time around?
Well, as you know, the Biomin mycotoxin survey is part of the technical service we offer to our customers. And we collect data from their feed materials samples to help them to understand which mycotoxins are found, at which concentrations, and the potential threats to their animals. So based on the data, we can give tailored recommendations regarding the most suitable product and proper dosage for complete and cost-effective mycotoxin risk management. So let's have a look at the numbers. So Biomin run this survey every year since 2004. In 2020, we tested more than 21,000 samples on finished feed and raw materials. And we performed more than 96,000 analyses. So this data came from 79 countries. This gives us a pretty good picture of the worldwide occurrence of mycotoxins. But let's go through into this topic with more details and have a look at the worldwide contamination. So let me explain how to read this map. For all regions, we listed the prevalence for the main mycotoxins, analyzed in the boxes. You can see how many samples tested positive for aflatoxin, zearalenone, deoxynivalenol, T2 toxin, fumonisin, and ochratoxin A. In this world map, the subregions of the world are colored according to the percentage of the samples above the risk threshold. So worldwide, 65% of the samples exceed these thresholds.
Risk threshold may be a tricky concept for some of our listeners. Could you explain it to us?
Yes, of course. So the risk thresholds are defined by BioMin due to worldwide practical experience and in the field, and scientific trials, and also according to the literature. So yellow means moderate risk, and up to red representing extreme risk with more than 75% of the tested samples above the risk threshold. So we can see that all regions are affected by mycotoxin. And then take into consideration global trade of raw materials. So the occurrence and concentrations you observe pose a potential threat to swine, poultry, ruminant, and aquaculture production.
Well, thanks. That makes a lot of sense. So tell me, according to your analysis, what are the main factors contributing to the patterns of worldwide mycotoxin occurrence that you see?
Well, as we know, fungi on crops in the field or in the storage levels have produced mycotoxins a long time. So we know that the environmental stress has a significant impact on this. And at the moment, climate change is the main trigger influencing mycotoxin prevalence around the world. So extreme scenarios such as desertification, floods, and fluctuation between wet and dry periods affect the life cycles of fungi. So weather conditions at certain growing stages, particularly flowering and harvesting, definitely influence the mycotoxin occurrence. And to illustrate this impact, I have brought some examples here. So soybean planting in Brazil was underway due to little rainfalls, and something similar happened in Argentina. And you can remember that this region was affected by the phenomenon called La Nina last year. So in the US, also the corn and soybean crops were affected due to damaging weather conditions during August in parts of the Midwest region. And also in central China, devastating floods in June and July caused also a huge impact on agriculture, damaging huge crops areas, including rice, vegetables, and fruit. And the strong floods also occurred in Bangladesh with a lot of damage. So as you can see, these extreme weather events are increasingly present, impacting our lives and the production of the raw materials for food and feed production.
So in the world maps that you just showed us, there are many different mycotoxins in the mix. Do these occur in similar patterns everywhere, or is there a geographic variation?
Yeah, good point, Josh. I think to answer this question, let's go through the data. And we have a separate map for each region that shows the sub-regional risk. And let's start with the US and Canada. So as you can see here, the risk is extreme. And the gray bars indicate the prevalence of the main mycotoxins detected on all analysis performed. And we can compare with the prevalence of that same mycotoxins presented in the previous year. So the pictures of animals are colored according to the proportion of samples above the risk threshold for each animal species. So meaning animal colors indicate the risk posed to these species by the prevalence and concentration of each mycotoxin in all samples from this region. So clearly, DON is the one of the main concern in all species. As highlights from this region, in corn, we observed a high DON prevalence where 72% of the samples were contaminated with this mycotoxin, followed by FUM with 70% and ZAN with 40%. And also DGGS, corn DGGS calls our attention as it is highly contaminated with Fusarium mycotoxins. And we will show more details about it in the next slides, right? So here, let me guide you through in this slide. In the figure to the right, we see the co-contamination. So how many mycotoxins are present in a sample? Non-mycotoxin, one mycotoxin, or more than one. So in corn, we detected a high co-contamination where 60% of the samples were contaminated with more than one mycotoxin. Here in the left corner, you can see the prevalence of the main mycotoxins. And on the top, in the table, we can see the number of samples investigated, average and maximum values. So the average of contamination were quite high for DON, with more than 750 ppbs, FUM with more than 2,400, and ZAN 300 ppbs. So also corn byproducts became alternative ingredients for feed formulation, especially in crisis times when companies want to reduce the cost of the diet. So this raw material was especially subject to FUM, DON, and ZAN contamination. So 92% of the samples were contaminated with more than one of these mycotoxins. And another important corn byproduct, so corn gluten, was especially subject to Fusarium mycotoxin, with average of positive around 2,800 for FUM, 1,600 for DON, and almost 600 for ZAN. So this is really high. And finally, for this region, in finished feed, DON was the most prevalent mycotoxin present in 83% of the samples analyzed. So what calls our attention, it's also the high average of FUM that was around 3,600 ppb. So with a maximum around 66,500 ppb.
So Alex, can you maybe give our listeners a 2-sentence summary, what they should keep in mind?
Yes, absolutely. So DON and FUM were the highest threats in this region, definitely. And pay special attention to ZAN that rise the average of contamination as well. So we know that these three toxins can work together to make things even worse for the animals.
I see. So what about the Latin American countries?
Well, so let's move to the Central and South America. And in this region, the risk is high. So Central America is at the extreme and South America at severe risk. So FUM is the most abundant mycotoxin in this region. It contains 84% of, contaminates 84% of corn, reaching a maximum of 56,000 ppb. And DON is present in 94% of cereal samples, and they tended to test high average concentrations, more than 2,000 ppb. But let me show more details for some countries in this region, and let's start with Mexico. For corn, the most mycotoxin was FUM at 97% prevalence, followed by DON at 55%. So for both mycotoxins, the prevalence rise compared with the 2019 data. Additionally, more than one mycotoxin were found in 83% of these samples analyzed. So corn DGS was especially subject to FUM, DON, and ZAM contamination as usual. So what is impressive here is the average of DON, almost 4,400 ppb. And for another country in this region, Guatemala, 92% of finished feed samples were contaminated with more than one mycotoxin. So the maximum found for FUM, DON, and ZAM were close to 5,000 ppb, 2,700 and 1,000 ppb respectively. But let's go through the south, and then let's start with Brazil, one of the most important countries in the region, producing and exporting raw materials for animal production. So we detect a high FUM prevalence, where 83% of corn samples were contaminated with this mycotoxin, followed by DON with 48%. FUM presented an average close to 2,300 ppb, with a maximum concentration of 56,000. So what is also interesting is the maximum value found for ZAM, so 4,250 ppb. This high contamination can cause several clinical problems for the animals in the field, especially in the reproductive part. And here we have the soybean data from Brazil. So this is important. The raw material was particularly affected by DON, ZAM, and T2 toxin. So what was a surprise is the maximum found for ZAM, around 43,800 ppb, really high. And wheat brown was, as expected, high contaminated with DON, with average of positive more than 2,000 ppb. Interesting is the high co-occurrence with ZAM and T2 toxin in this raw material. From Argentina, the situation was quite similar to Brazil. So corn was high contaminated with 2,721 ppb of FUM on average, followed by DON with 631 ppb. However, the maximum DON found was really high with more than 6,000 ppb. And also for wheat from this region, yeah, the wheat were highly contaminated by DON with average of around 1,900 ppb, reaching a maximum of more than 13,000 ppb. So also the other fusarium mycotoxins, ZAM, T2 toxin, and fumonisin were present.
Wow, so it looks like all the American countries, North and South America, are exposed to high levels of mycotoxin contamination, especially fusarium toxins, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the American regions are showing high risk for all animal species, especially regarding FUM, DON, and ZAM, as we presented.
Okay, so now let's have a quick look at the highlights of mycotoxin occurrence in Europe and Asia. And for this, I'd like to bring Annelies into the conversation.
Thanks, Josh. I would like to start with Europe. And in Europe, we see the overall risk is still high to severe. The most prevalent mycotoxin is deoxynivalenol, followed by zearalenone. And the risk in Europe is really mainly due to deoxynivalenol occurrence, particularly in corn. Some highlights I want to show you. Besides the high prevalence of deoxynivalenol in corn, we see a slight increase in zearalenone contamination levels. The average of positives increased to over 170 ppb, and also in cereals, we could detect deoxynivalenol at concentrations as high as 11,870 ppb. So this just is a short overview. Moving on to Asia. In this region, As last year, the risk remains extreme, and the highest risk we see in South Asia and also in China and Taiwan. East Asia and Southeast Asia are still at severe risk. And again, there is moderate risk for Australia and New Zealand. We see in Asia again high levels of the Fusarium mycotoxins. The fumonisin are the most prevalent mycotoxins found, followed by deoxynivalenol and zearalenone. Interestingly, the abundance of ochratoxin A as well as T2 increased when we compare it to the last year. In this region, aflatoxin is still really a big problem for all livestock. A maximum of over 2,490 ppb was found. And also zearalenone occurs frequently in 68% of the corn samples, and it reaches a maximum of 11,780 ppb.
Alex and Annalisa, thank you for your insights into the different regions. The amount and specificity of the data are pretty impressive as always, so thank you very much. Now I'd like to shift gears and ask you all to think a bit about mycotoxin detection, in particular detection of the so-called usual suspects, the big four that are most commonly regulated. Of course, I'm talking about aflatoxin, deoxynivalenol, fumonisin, and zearalenone. And for this, I'd like to bring in Nora Kogelnik, one of our mycotoxin experts at Romer Labs.
Hi, Josh.
Hi again. So Romer Labs has a new rapid detection system to detect exactly these mycotoxins, right?
That's right. We're calling it AgroStrip Pro Vortex system. And here's what it looks like. With lateral flow devices for the 4 big mycotoxins you just mentioned, and the AgroVision Pro Reader incubator.
So tell us, what will you be discussing in the few minutes you have here?
I will be talking about what the AgroStrip Pro Vortex system is, how it works with the AgroVision Pro Reader, and the test protocol in a nutshell. But first the question, what is that mycotoxin testers need and expect from a rapid test system? To answer this, I would like to invite you to consider a typical testing situation. I'm sure that many of you will recognize this. Incoming raw materials either at grain storage facilities, feed producers, you name it. Incoming raw materials are tested for mycotoxins. A decision immediately has to be made whether to accept or reject the grain according to internal acceptance thresholds. If it's accepted, the results may have a bearing on where stored. You can easily imagine how this could be a stressful situation. While one shipment is being tested, another truck is waiting or driving up onto the scale. Time is of the essence, so testers need results fast. There could be more trucks just waiting for approval to unload. To make matters more difficult, space is often limited. There's often no lab, just small testing locations at facility entrance gates, and conditions are dusty, you might expect when tons of grain are being loaded and unloaded. Furthermore, you can't expect operators to have extensive experience with diagnostic tools. In our experience, and this is what we're hearing from our customers, operators have little training in these techniques. Last but not least, it is often an overlooked fact that the ambient temperature can vary by a lot. This can have an impact on the efficacy of the technical equipment you are using.
It doesn't sound easy trying to detect mycotoxins under these circumstances.
That's why we have developed AgroStrip Pro Vortex. It is first and foremost rapid. Testers like those at our grain receptions are here can up the grain intake with a quick sample preparation, a 4-minute assay time, and the capacity to test 4 samples at once on site. I will say it again because we are proud of it. A 4-minute assay time. AgroStrip Pro Vortex is simple. Eliminate errors with a common extraction, dilution, and an intuitive walk-away operation. No sophisticated training process is required. The water-based extraction also means no handling or disposal of organic solvents. It is robust, which means it's built with the tough conditions like those I just discussed in mind.
So just because it might be a bit dusty doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice precision.
Yep, it couldn't have said it better by myself. And just to round out the first intro to the system, AgroStrip Pro Vortex features a streamlined testing procedure and the connectivity that testers have come to expect. Our test strips are blockchain enabled, and you can transfer your data to a PC or print it out with ease. The AgroStrip Pro Vortex is a complete system consisting of lateral flow devices for the detection of total aflatoxin, deoxynivalenol, total fumonisin, zearalenone, and the AgroVision Pro reader. The AgroStrip Pro Vortex mycotoxin test strips are designed to cover a broad detection range in combination with high sensitivity in order to receive accurate results even at low mycotoxin concentrations. Here are some of the highlights, and don't worry if I go through the next slide a bit too fast. You can look all this up on romalabs.com at your leisure. Our aflatoxin strip offers a quantitation range from 0 up to 460 ppb. It also features a high sensitive method with a limit of detection of 1 ppb, the lowest available by LFD on the market. Our DON strip has a quantitation range from 0 up to 44 ppm, with a limit of detection of 0.1 ppm and a limit of quantification of 0.2 ppm. The test strip offers a broad detection range without compromising on sensitivity. AgroStrip Pro Total Fumonisin Vortex offers the same broad quantitation range from 0 up to 44 ppm, with the high sensitivity of a limit of detection of 0.1 ppm. And here's our SON strip. It has a wide concentration range from 0 up to 1650 ppb, with a limit of detection of 25 ppb and a limit of quantification of 40 ppb.
That sounds great, but I'm really interested in hearing more about that reader.
The AgroVision Pro reader is much more than just a reader. It's got a built-in incubator and has a 7-inch display, and very important, all 4 slots operate independently, which makes it that much easier to use.
So how does all this work together?
First, don't laugh. Turn on the AgroVision Pro and choose mycotoxins. Then you have your extraction. Weigh in your sample and add the extraction buffer, bag, and water. Shake, shake, shake. Dilute and centrifuge. One thing I point out here, all 4 mycotoxins share a common 1:11 dilution.
Which means that you can test for all 4 mycotoxins from the same extraction, right?
That's right. And here comes the fun part. Put the strip in the cartridge and put the cartridge into the reader. The AgroVision Pro will prompt you for some information about the sample. And then you prepare the extract into the cartridge.
And then what?
Then you can do whatever you want to. Prepare another sample, read a book, watch a cut video. The AgroVision Pro reader takes care of the rest. Incubation and timing are all automated. Results are displayed automatically when the test is done. Of course, you can get more detailed information for each sample. Just tap the information icon on your set. So let's sum up. The AgroStrip Pro Vortex is rapid. Test 4 mycotoxin at once in just 4 minutes. With a common extraction and dilution and an intuitive walk-away operation, it's easy and really to use. It's robust, giving precise, reliable results even in the toughest of conditions. It is connected with blockchain-enabled strips and easily printable and exportable results. And last but not least, our experts are here to help whenever and wherever you need them.
So where can people find out more about AgroStrip Pro Vortex?
Just visit romalabs.com/en/agrostrip-pro. All you need and more is there.
All right, well, thank you, Nora, and congrats to you and the whole team for rolling out such an impressive test system. Now, as we know, there are more than just 4 mycotoxins out there. What about all those other mycotoxins, Annalisa?
Yes, exactly. In addition to the main mycotoxins that are well studied and subject to regulation, There are also other mycotoxins researchers are warning of, the so-called emerging mycotoxins. In Biomane, we offer the multi-mycotoxin analysis method Spectrum Top 50, which detects over 50 mycotoxins, including the emerging mycotoxins, in just one run.
So maybe for listeners not so familiar with these terms, what do you mean by emerging and masked mycotoxins? Can you help us out with the terminology?
Sure, it's a good question. The emerging mycotoxins are frequently found on agricultural commodities. There is scientific literature supporting that they have toxic effects and investigations, and also the European Food Safety Authority is showing increasingly interest and is publishing reports with risk assessment for these toxins. I also want to point out the masked mycotoxins very briefly. Here you can see a fungus, a mice plant infected by a fungus and producing a mycotoxin, deoxynivalenol. What can happen in the plant is that as a defense mechanism, the plants attach a glucose molecule. Now the molecule is called deoxynivalenol 3-glucoside. This is a masked mycotoxin. We call it like this because it cannot be detected anymore with conventional methods. What happens in the animal then is that in the gastrointestinal tract, the glucose is cleaved and the original deoxynivalenol is present and can harm the animal. Also, the EFSA, European Food Safety Authority, highlighted the importance of considering the occurrence of those masked mycotoxins. Now I want to show you an overview of our results with the Spectrum Top 50 method. 2,878 samples have been analyzed, and the mycotoxins are listed in the left according to their abundance. Most prevalent was deoxynivalenol, and in red we see the masked mycotoxin, deoxynivalenol 3-glucoside. It was present in 42% of the samples, and in blue the emerging mycotoxins. And here ovaricin, alternariol, and eniatines have been very frequently found. And just to give you an idea of what we know about those emerging mycotoxins now, for molynylphamine, it has been reported that broilers are very susceptible. It is genotoxic and can have negative effects, particularly on the heart, but also muscular weakness, respiratory distress, and immunosuppression have been described. Ovaricin and eniatines showed negative effects on the immune system, and accumulation in fat-rich tissue was shown, although to a very low degree. Alternariol showed no acute toxicity, but still the chronic effects needs to be investigated. And in lab experiments in vitro, we see cytotoxicity, mutagenicity, as well as effects on reproductive and immune system.
So let me ask, what about the prevalence of these emerging mycotoxins?
Yes, I want to show you their global occurrence based on our data from 2020. We see they are globally present and they are highly frequent. I show you in blue the two emerging mycotoxins most often found in a different region in different commodities. And again, in red, the masked mycotoxin, deoxynivalenol 3-glucoside, and another mycotoxin I have not mentioned yet, nivalenol in orange. What we can see is that the emerging mycotoxins are frequently found in the different commodities and globally. And looking at the occurrence of the masked form, we see it was found in 80% of all corn samples in South Africa. So this was pretty interesting for me. And also in 42% of wheat samples in Europe and 42% of finished feed samples in Asia. The data is also interesting for nivalenol. It was frequently found in South America and Europe. And this is important because nivalenol is also a triiodicene and it can significantly add up to the triiodicene contamination. It can cause maybe even more toxic effects than deoxynivalenol, and it can also show synergistic effects with deoxynivalenol.
Well, many thanks to you, Anneliese, for these insights into multi-mycotoxin analysis.
My pleasure.
Let me now steer our conversation back to another relevant issue. And for this, I'd like to bring Alex back into the conversation. Alex, once you have test results in hand and you've identified a contamination issue, you're probably going to want to mitigate the risks to your animals. How can Biomane help with that? What can Biomane provide to the market?
Great. Yeah. As we know, the mycotoxins have different structures and that's why different strategies are needed for their counteraction. So with this in mind, Biomin offers to the market the well-known MycoFix product line that works with 3 different strategies. So adsorption, biotransformation, and bioprotection. So adsorption via bentonite, it's a proven solution. It's gone through the full process of EU authorization for binding aflatoxins, mainly. Then we have the biotransformation components, contains funzyme for the degradation of fumonisins, the BSH for the breakdown of trichotoxins, and the MTV components, counteracting the zearalenone and ochratoxin. On top of this, MycoFix contains the bioprotection components to support and protect the liver and the immune system of the animals against the effects of mycotoxins. So the MycoFix product line, it's the most advanced tool for mycotoxin control. So to reach this level, Biomin cooperate with leading universities and research centers from all around the world. And there are several peer-reviewed papers published to prove the efficacy of these products, not only in vitro, but in vivo as well. But for more information about the products, please contact a Biomin representative.
And with that, we move to our Q&A session. Thank you to all the participants out there who've taken the time to come up with questions. Thank you for your interest. I'd also like to invite all of our panelists back onto screen. Well, this first question seems to be one that's directed at Biomin. What is the greatest risk in animal feed today? High levels of mycotoxins or a combination of low levels of different compounds? This seems to be talking about synergistic effects, if I'm not mistaken. Who would like to take it?
I would like to take over this question.
Go ahead, Annalisa.
So first, what I additionally want to say that, of course, the high effects, they can cause clinical signs in animals and are a huge threat to animal production. But of course, also the lower amounts will impact the performance of the animals. We see in studies that especially the intestine and the immune system is affected at low contamination levels. And of course, as I mentioned before, there can be synergistic effects, for example, between deoxynivalenol and nivalenol at low concentrations, or also between the often co-occurring deoxynivalenol and zearalenone. So it's
all right.
Undecided, don't underestimate low-level contamination.
I see. Thank you. Looks like we have a question about the AgriVision Pro reader. This one will be for Nora. The question says, how do the 4 slots on the reader work together?
Well, basically, they don't work together. We've designed the AgriVision Pro reader to be able to carry out 4 separate tests completely independently. And each slot operates like its own miniature lab and delivers results whenever they are ready, regardless of what's going on with the other slots.
Right, well, that sounds like a real time saver, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Very good, thank you. And now we have one final question. This seems to be one relating to the survey results. I'll throw this one at you, Alex. Why has the level of zearalenone in corn increased?
Well, yeah, we saw in our data definitely that these mycotoxins, especially in some specific regions, such as US and South America, in some raw materials, the level of contamination is really high. And I definitely can associate this with the climate changes or the impact on the field of this parameter, because we know zearalenone as a Fusarium mycotoxin, it's produced already in the field, and together with fumonisins and deoxynivalenol, they came already in high levels to us in the grains. So definitely this stress from the field, caused mainly by the climate change, it's contributing, in my opinion, for this zearalenone prevalence around the world. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. And with that, we are coming to the end of our Q&A session and also to the end of our webinar. As promised, you'll be getting a few goodies from us. You'll receive an email including links to today's recording, the brand new Biomin Mycotoxin Survey Annual Report, the latest issue of Spot On from Rumber Labs, and a link to a short on-site mycotoxin testing video. You should receive this message from us within the next 24 hours. You'll also be prompted to answer a short survey on today's webinar. It should take about 2 minutes to complete. By providing your feedback, you allow us to improve our webinar program and identify future topics for discussion. We would appreciate your taking the time to complete the survey. So it remains for me to thank our speakers. So thank you, Alex Marchioro.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Anneliese Müller.
Thanks to you, Josh.
And great thanks to you also, Nora Kogelnick.
Well, thank you very much.
This is Joshua Davis from Romer Labs saying visit us at romerlabs.com or biomin.net to learn more about how we can help you develop a mycotoxin detection and management strategy. Thank you for your attention and your interest, and have a good day.